I'm in practice. Here we go. Now we're live.
All right. Well, good morning. Thank you all for joining the San Francisco Democratic County Central Committee on a beautiful Saturday. This is a joint meeting of the Issues and Resolutions and the Endorsement Committees. So we are here to do endorsement interviews, just the interviews, in advance of the June 7th primary election. And we have one candidate. We also have a number of local ballot measures. So appreciate you all taking the time to join us. Why don't we do roll call, and then I do have a motion to add something to the agenda, and it's really clerical.
Minute. Member Avalos, absent. Member Baraka, absent. Member Berry,
Present.
Member Campos, absent. Member Chen,
Here.
Member Dufty, absent. Member Galata,
Present.
Member Haney, absent. Member Ibanez, absent. Member Kim, absent. Member Lacroix, absent. Member Vice Chair Lee, Vice Chair Lee.
Vice Chair Levitt, sorry.
Oh, Levitt, I'm sorry. It's wrong on my thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Member Lee. Member Lee is Janice.
Thank you. My apologies. Member Loftus, Member Levitt,
Present.
Member Mahogany, Member Mandelman, absent. Member Marr, absent. Member Moliga, absent. Member Morales, absent. Member Raju,
Zaki Shaheen here as proxy.
thank you. Member Ronan, absent. Member Thomas, absent. Member Tung,
Here. Good morning.
morning. Member Williams, absent. Member Feinstein,
Here by proxy.
thank you. Member Pelosi, absent. Member Spear, absent. Member Kounalakis, absent. Member Ma, absent. Member Cohen, absent. Member Weiner, absent. Member Ting. There's 7 in attendance. Vice Chair Levitt.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much. So I just want to do something quickly here, and it's clerical, but I'm going to make a motion that we review the agenda. It's the 72-hour agenda. And if members can take a look, and if you can put that in the chat, Moises, the link to the 72-hour and 10-day notice.
Sure.
So do I have a second for that?
Second.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair Galata. So as we review the minutes, I'd like to make a motion just to make a clerical change. There should be both the 10-day notice posted and also the 72-hour. And I'll explain the difference, but the most current one is currently saying 10-day meeting, but it should really say 72-hour. And I'll explain a little about the difference. The original one that came out a week and a half ago also included the state judges that were running. However, due to a state law, if they are running unopposed, then they won't be on the ballot. So therefore, we won't need to hold endorsement interviews. I'm sure you could still reach out to the judge candidates, but at this point, we do not need to go through that process. And therefore, the 72-hour agenda reflects what we are doing today, which is going to be an interview of candidate and current San Francisco City Attorney, David Chu, and then also a number of qualified local ballot measures for June 7th. So with that explanation, my motion is just to correct the agenda so that it properly reflects it's a 72-hour agenda. Second.
Second that motion by member.
Great, thank you. Okay, great. So I think, by acclamation, right, we can just make those corrections. Is there anything else that anyone has caught? Okay, great. So why don't we proceed? And I will hand this over to Secretary Ibanez and to Member Berry for item number 2.
Yeah, thank you so much, Member Lovett or Vice Chair Lovett. And we want to start our interviews and just go really quickly, review the process of how we're going to be doing the interviews of our city attorney. City Attorney 2, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Specifically, both Chair Barry and I want to acknowledge the fact that you're unopposed and you took the time to fill out our questionnaire, our long questionnaire, and you're here.
It was very lengthy, but it was good.
Yes, and there's a purpose behind that, and we wanted to make sure, to acknowledge that and recognize that, and want to say thank you so much for being here with us. The way we're going to do this, we have 10 minutes. We're going to allow you for 3 minutes for you to tell us why you're running, why you're seeking our endorsement, and then after that, we're going to open it up for questions from our DCCC members, and Member Barry is going to keep time. And then at the end of the interview, Member Barry is going to give some closing remarks. So with that, let's start the clock and let us know why are you running and why you're seeking our endorsement.
Great. Well, first of all, good morning, Democrats. It's great to see all of you. And I just want to appreciate the work of each of you individually and collectively as Democrats. Years ago, I ran for the DCCC and served on your body for 3 terms and was an ex officio for the past 7 years. And I just know how important your work is and just appreciate your fight for our Democratic Party. So I'm going to take a few moments and just talk a little bit about my background as a lawyer and as a progressive lawmaker, and then a little bit about my priorities as city attorney. So for those of you who I don't know, I'm the son of Chinese immigrants. And growing up in Boston in the 1970s and 80s during the days of busing desegregation, we were the only Chinese family in our neighborhood. We saw a lot of racism. We experienced racism. These are experiences that led me to study the civil rights movement and inspired me in the fight for justice that I think we all share, which led me to law school. And a couple of years later, I came to San Francisco to work for a civil rights organization on a lawsuit challenging Proposition 187, which would have kicked immigrant families out of public hospitals and immigrant kids out of public schools. That was the first lawsuit I ever worked on. We succeeded. It hooked me onto this fight for justice in the field of public interest law. It's why I continued work as a civil rights attorney, as a clerk to a liberal Ninth Circuit judge, as Democratic counsel to the Senate Judiciary Committee, and as an assistant DA here in San Francisco. And it led me eventually to run for the Board of Supervisors, where I served as president for 6 years, and then the legislature. I've worked with many of you during my time in the legislature, but I'll mention a few things. I served as the policy chair of our state's legislative progressive caucus and took on some of the biggest fights against some of the most entrenched corporate interests in our state. During the worst housing crisis in our state's history, I fought to pass some of the strongest eviction protections in the country. We took on big pharma and passed the strongest drug price transparency laws in the country. We took on lead paint companies to make sure that they paid hundreds of millions of dollars for poisoning low-income communities of color. We worked with San Francisco activists taking on Wall Street banks as we passed the first state law to allow for local public banks. And again, working with many of you, we authored major reproductive rights laws, environmental laws, laws with the LGBTQ community, immigrant laws, et cetera. Now, since becoming your city attorney late last year, our office has negotiated the largest settlement in the history of San Francisco's Office of Labor Standards Enforcement, millions of dollars against DoorDash for denying healthcare and sick leave to thousands of workers.
Mr. Chu, that's been 2 minutes. If you could please finish that thought.
Sure, I'm sorry, I thought it was 3 minutes.
It is 3 minutes, Member Barry.
Oh, okay, I apologize.
No worries. Was going to mention that we won a major case at the California Supreme Court to protect $123 million of funding for teachers and students and schools. In recent months, we've pursued investigations against rogue COVID testing companies, allegations that Uber hasn't treated transgender drivers well. In the past month, our deputies defended immigrant families at the US Supreme Court in a case involving a horrible anti-immigrant Trump policy. And I'll just note this past week, I issued our first cease and desist orders against 3 construction companies responsible for industrial dust in the Bayview. Let me just conclude by saying, I want to build on the great tradition of this office on a couple of priorities. First, in the wake of Black Lives Matter, Me Too, anti-Asian hate, we need to continue to stand up for our collective civil rights. Second, during this era of intense income inequality in our country, I want to make sure that we are holding corporations accountable and standing up for workers and consumers. And then lastly, I want to make sure we use the role of the law to tackle our city's biggest challenges, from housing and homelessness to climate crisis to rooting up corruption and holding city government to the highest ethical standards. And with that, good to be with y'all and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. So we are now opening for questions. If you can please raise your hand. Member Galota.
Thank you. Thank you, City Attorney Chu, for being with us today. I just had one question. Can you talk a little bit more about how your office is working to address public corruption in the city and county of San Francisco? I know we've chatted a little bit about this, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about your office's role in terms of what role you're playing in current investigations in light of the news stories and what's come out about a number of department heads, as well as quid pro quo activity. How is your office helping to increase trust in local government and addressing these real concerns?
Yeah, it's a great question. Let me start by saying that the investigations into corruption are ongoing. So I obviously can't talk about specifics with regard to those investigations. But let me say this, which is when I was working at City Hall last as the president of the Board of Supervisors in 2013, 2014, I was concerned at that time about whispers and hints of what I thought might be some suggestions of corruption, particularly in some of the departments that have unfortunately made headlines recently. And in fact, way back 8 years ago, then City Attorney Herrera and we actually teamed up to introduce a major package of ethics reform to tighten rules with regards to lobbyists, with regards to permit expediters at the Department of Building Inspection, with regards to large scale real estate developers. And while we were able to pass some aspects of that, it wasn't the full major reform that we had wanted. And then years later, I think we've all been profoundly disappointed and frankly angered as San Franciscans to learn about what has happened, particularly what has come out of the investigations by my office in the last couple of years, which led to a number of arrests by the FBI, as well as resignations by major department heads in San Francisco. As I said, the investigations are ongoing. We will follow the facts as they lead, wherever they lead. I think it's incredibly important. We have to restore public's faith and confidence in our government. And we need to make sure that we stamp out and root out corruption wherever it may exist. Our office, we have already put out, under my watch, our first public integrity report. There will be more discussions on this topic. And what I can also tell you is we have an entire unit of folks in our office whose job it is to investigate not just corruption, but when public dollars are not being used well, when there are whistleblowers, others, we also investigate them. So just know things are ongoing. And for members of the public who are watching, we're happy if you hear anything, if anyone knows anything, to please contact our office.
Thank you so much. Member Berry, or I should say Co-Chair Berry.
Thank you, Co-Chair Rollins. Thank you, Mr. Chu. I apologize for cutting you off earlier again, but let's get to the question. I was looking at the questionnaire that you filled out, and under economic justice, I actually wrote that question, and I inadvertently put the district attorney instead of saying city attorney, because we just went through the against the recall process. So that was on my mind. But the same question applies that I'd like to ask you is, do you believe the San Francisco City Attorney Racial Equity Plan is sufficient? And if the phases have been executed? And more importantly, I was at the hearing that established the Racial Equity Office, and regardless of the findings, regardless of the plans, there's no teeth in these plans. So basically your office could say you're going to fix disparities when it comes to racism, but there's no consequences. So one, do you believe that your plan is sufficient? The phase has been executed, and what can be done to put more teeth so that city departments will oblige by their plan?
Well, first of all, Madam Chair, thank you for clarifying. I have to admit, when I read the question focused on the district attorney's office, I was a little confused, particularly since they are a client of ours. So if the question is, let me just find it, do I believe that the city attorney's office racial equity plan is sufficient and the phases have been executed? Let me say this. I think that there is no agency in city government, and that includes my office, who do not have more work to do around racial equity, around diversity and inclusion, and equity and belonging. This has actually been a significant priority of mine in my first couple of months. We have a racial equity task force that was recently established as part of the initial racial equity plan that I've been meeting with. Also in the past year, our office has established so-called affinity groups. So African-American employees, Latinx employees, and other employees of diversity. I have met with each of them. We are talking about significant issues that still need to be addressed. And so I definitely think there is more work that our office can and should be doing. This is, I'll maybe make a little news here, but our office has not had an officer of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we are about to announce the creation of such a position, because I want someone who is part of my team who is focused on this with me. You know, every aspect of city government could probably do better in this, but I will say in our office, given a legal profession that is not particularly diverse, given a legal profession that frankly, by relying on precedent, has a lot of conservative forces that are in need of, say, updating, there's more work to be done here. Our profession as a whole does not reflect the diversity of San Francisco or California. And that is something I want to work on, not just for the profession, but for our office. I think it's important for us to really look at our recruitment practices, our hiring practices, our mentoring practices, our promotion practices, to make sure that we are doing the best we can in this area. I've already made a number of changes with regard to some of those policies to make our office more supportive of diversity within our office. And then I will also say that as we do a better job in this space, I think we will be able to work better with other city departments as we ensure that these values of standing up for equity and inclusion and diversity are upheld throughout city government. I know there were some other questions that touched on those issues, but we have work to do in city government in this space, and I appreciate your question in this area.
Thank you, members. We have about 3 minutes if anybody else would like to ask City Attorney a question.
Member Lovett?
So I understand when you did that cease and desist order, you know, it seems very specific, right? These trucks are stirring up a lot of dust, but the context is, let's see, over 2 decades of, you know, attempted redevelopment and putting this on the fast track in Bayview Hunters Point, where the Hunters Point shipyard has been really the epicenter of corruption. And who suffers the most? But the residents, because already those communities, and I worked there in the mid-90s, I worked there again in the about 2014. And so, you know, as I walked around every day when I was, you know, on the job, I understood how residents are suffering And now this is a big boom for development, but how is your office going to really ensure that there are no more Tetra Techs who are, screwing with the data samples, and ultimately, ensuring the health of residents who not only suffer from asthma, but from, of course, the levels of radioactivity that have really plagued Hunters Point?
It's a great question. And let me start by saying that I am literally zooming in from the Bayview. My family, we live here, and I have seen firsthand what is happening in this community. I have for a number of years. It's been something that has been concerning me. Our recent cease and desist order against a couple of companies is our first foray into this fight for environmental justice, because the reality is we cannot allow particularly Black and brown communities to become a pollution free for all. And certainly around the country with various brownfield cleanups, we have seen that, and we certainly can't allow that to be the case in San Francisco. When the Hunters Point Shipyard project was approved, and your former colleague, my former colleague, Supervisor Sophie Maxwell, led that, the agreement was that private developers were going to invest over $1 billion of cleanup dollars to make sure that the toxic contaminants were being dealt with. And I think we were all horrified when we learned that some of the vendors involved in this were falsifying information, and you refer to them. Obviously, on my watch, this is something we will be focused on. We need to make sure this is the case. When it was brought to my attention in recent weeks, what was going on with the industrial dust, it was incredibly concerning, which is why we issued the cease and desist orders. What I would say to you and to the broader community, please reach out to our office if there is more evidence of wrongdoing. We will also continue to have investigators that are digging into this, literally, and this will be a partnership. One last thing I'll mention is at this very moment, our office is engaged in a major lawsuit against the 5 largest oil and gas companies in the world for their impact on climate change and billions of dollars of sea level rise infrastructure costs and how they impact our city. Climate change, environmental justice will be a top priority for me as your city attorney, and I look forward to working with you on this.
Thank you, City Attorney Chu. That would be the end of the questioning from our members. If you would like to, as a courtesy, give a 1-minute closing statement.
The only thing I'll just say is just appreciate your time. I'm honored to have the support of many members of the Central Committee, and I look forward to working with you on the priorities that I've laid out and that we all share, our collective civil rights, making sure we're dealing with climate, making sure we're dealing with our housing and homelessness crisis, making sure we are stamping out corruption in city government, making sure we're upholding workers and consumers. This is an office that has the reputation of being one of the very best public law offices in the country under my predecessor, and I certainly plan to do everything I can to continue to uplift that work to make sure that, like the Democratic Party, our office is fighting the fight for justice, fighting the fight for equity, fighting the fight for us all. So with that, I'd be honored to have the support of the Central Committee, and look forward to our work together in the community, and hope you have a good rest of your morning.
Thank you, City Attorney Chu. You have a nice day.
Thank you.
Members, on Wednesday night, we will be voting on the endorsement process for the city attorney position. Other than that, this concludes the endorsement process. Thank you, Chair Annabelle, Ibanez. Thank you for collaborating, and we'd like to turn it back over to Chair Lovett for the rest of the agenda.
And to clarify, we are committee chairs. So thank you so much to our endorsement committee chair and member Ibanez and Barry. And there's more to come in November. So for the June 7th ballot measure, we are looking at 7 local ballot measures, and I'll go through our ground rules for today. We do have representatives. Each presenter will have 2 minutes to speak, and that's followed by 10 minutes for question and answer with the SFDCCC members here. Q&A can be extended by a motion and a vote of members. Please keep your questions to a minute. And if you do have a second question, even if it's related, please take stat again by raising your hand or putting it in the chat. And I'll call in order. and then go through the members, make sure that the members who haven't had a chance to ask a question are all able to ask that first. And I also want to speak a little bit about process, since we noticed this meeting as we noticed our general meetings 10 days prior. And then even by the 72-hour agenda notice, which went out Wednesday, and thank you, Executive Director Moises Garcia, the opponents for the 7 in question hadn't materialized on the SF elections page. And I'll post that again in the chat. And that was specific for the local and district ballot measures. We do make a point to try to, invite folks from both sides. And so today we have proponents for the measure, and we would have invited you if you had asked to be invited to the dance, and we saw you officially listed on the SF elections page. So without further ado, I also want to recognize that today we have some esteemed San Francisco City department leaders and also supervisor and legislative staff here. So thank you for taking time. And now that these ballot measures are qualified, then they are really here in a non-government capacity to speak. So I wanted to make that distinction. And just also, just for greater clarity, the agenda can be found in a link in the chat. You can also go to sfdemocrats.org and go look for that. The SF elections is what I've posted, and Moises, if you can post that to the Facebook as well, because I think it's important, in this last piece I'll say, to just distinguish that we have 1 bond measure, 2 charter amendments, and then we have a number of initiative ordinances. So there are distinctions in what is being brought to the voters in June. So let us start with Muni reliability and street safety. Today we have 2 minutes for Jeff Tumlin to speak about that. Thank you for coming, Mr. Tumlin.
Thank you, and I'm happy to be here. And of course, while I am the director of the SFMTA, I'm here as a 30-year resident and regular Muni rider of San Francisco. Prop A is a $400 million general obligation bond. This is effectively a reauthorization of our previous bond, which we have spent down or fully encumbered. And we will be spending it across 3 key categories. But first, I want to emphasize the necessity of getting some additional capital money in order to be eligible for the significant amount of federal infrastructure money that we're hoping to come towards San Francisco. All of those grants require a local match, and we need to make sure that we have sufficient capital funds in order to make ourselves eligible for that federal relief capital funding. This bond funds a couple of key categories. It's a very pragmatic capital improvement program that is focused primarily on Muni speed and reliability, just basically upgrading our main lines to reduce delay and improve speed and reliability of the system. Related to that, there's a significant amount of money that's simply directed at deferred maintenance. All of you ride Muni, I'm sure, and you know the aspects of the system, and particularly our facilities that are over 100 years old and haven't been remodeled since then, or even seismically upgraded. So there's a lot that is basic state of good repair. And then there's another tranche of funds that is about safety and accessibility. So it's achieving our Vision Zero goals, ensuring that the system is accessible to people in wheelchairs, and also making motor vehicle traffic flow smoothly by upgrading our old traffic signals. And across all of these categories, of course, we will be investing in our Muni equity strategy, directing funds to neighborhoods that have not received the sort of investment that we should have been giving them over the last several decades. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Okay, do we have any members who would like to speak? Let's see. Was Member Ibanez's hand up first? Or Member
Go first,
Barry?
or Member Barry can go. It does not matter.
Okay.
I had Member
Okay. Thank you so much for being here with us. And I do have a question, and it's regarding labor standards. Can you tell me what are the language in there that supports the current labor standards that we have here in our city, like the labor project agreements?
Yes, that's a very good question. 2 weeks ago, we came to an agreement with the building trades to include project labor agreements in all of our work. As perhaps you know, the SFMTA, because of our charter authority, was exempt from those citywide standards. We have gotten ourselves into alignment with other city departments in that regard.
And then just to follow up, do you know if the San Francisco Labor Council and obviously the building trades are supporting this bond?
Yes, I was just at the leadership of the building trades earlier this week. They are enthusiastic supporters. And one of the reasons why they are so supportive is that this really is a pragmatic approach to infrastructure upgrades. As a result of that, we'll be spending less money in this round on buying a lot of steel and concrete, and a lot more money on using skilled labor to make our existing system more effective. And so this bond will deliver more skilled labor jobs per dollar than our previous rounds and probably any other capital measure in the country.
Thank you so much.
Member Barry.
Yeah, my question is this. I comprehend wanting federal funds and that's been the normal for who knows how long. However, San Francisco is the most expensive city in the United States, and due to SFMTA receiving federal funds, low income is set at the federal level and not the local level in regards to things like obtaining an abstract or whatnot from the SFMTA, things like that. So is there any way that policy can be changed or low income levels be based on a local level, regardless of receiving federal funds?
Yeah, so part of the challenge with income restrictions for federally funded projects is we have to abide by the federal rules when we receive federal funds. That said, we have a history of making pretty strategic decisions to locally fund projects where it is important to have additional equity considerations that the federal rules would not permit. So part of what my budget team does is looks at all of our capital and operating budget holistically and uses what authority we have to move funds around to prioritize, federal investment on the projects where it's fine to follow the federal rules, and then to use our local funds, including our locally generated bond funding, where we don't have such restrictions. We're also right now working on trying.
You're muted.
Yeah, sorry, I just muted myself. We're working to change the income thresholds for discounted fare products. We have, for example, the Lifeline Pass, where the income thresholds are so low that it's impossible even to afford a studio apartment in the Tenderloin. And so we're wanting to raise those thresholds to something that more approaches an actual financial strain in a city as expensive as San Francisco.
I saw Member Secretary Lee's hand up, but had you lowered it?
Well, I'm deferring to SFMTA CAC member Chen.
Okay, then Member Chen, please.
Thank you so much for joining us, Director Tumlin. My question is, in the past, the MTA has disregarded community input and kind of lied to the community about certain projects that they were going to do, or different policies. So my question is, why should these communities still support this bond measure, even though they've been lied to in the past? How can we make sure that these changes will actually happen?
So I understand the unfortunate history of this agency. Part of the reason why I was brought on 2 years ago is to change the agency culture and to be more realistic about what it is that we can achieve. And more importantly, try to develop trust with the community. I also recognize areas where I have stumbled in this regard as I've struggled to learn how to do this job more effectively. The best that I can offer is my own humility and willingness to continue to listen, and my personal commitment that we intend to do right by communities. We have tried very hard during the pandemic, even as we lost 3/4 of muni service, to focus our remaining resources on communities that need it the most, and to co-design with community our service restoration process. It was the result of intensive community work that helped us to understand the unique importance of muni lines like the 27 and the 21, which we redesigned with community to be more effective now than those lines were pre-COVID, even as we've struggled with being understaffed and under-resourced. And now that we have finally received sufficient federal operating funds to begin hiring again, I've got 1,000 vacancies in the organization that I need to fill. We are again trying to invest what we do have in the communities that need it the most, and follow the commitments we made in the Muni Equity Strategy around prioritizing investments for people who have the fewest mobility choices.
Thank you, Mr. Tumlin, and Vice Chair Glada.
Just saw Member Chan's hand come back up, so I want to see if she had a follow-up question before I ask mine.
Oh, no, it's fine. I'm thinking. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Tumlin, for being with us. Happy to hear that the bond will be funding Vision Zero. Obviously, as you know, we are not on target to meet our Vision Zero goal of 2024. So would love to hear a little bit more specificity around what the bond is going to fund in terms of Vision Zero improvements that are so very needed, particularly in our high injury corridors and intersections throughout the city. And prioritizing equity as well in terms of those investments?
Yes, that's a great question. One of the things that we were able to do during COVID is double our production of Vision Zero quick build projects. And we did that, you've seen these all over the city with the plastic posts and the paint and, colored paint and whatnot. One of the reasons why that process has been incredibly effective is it allows us to move really, really quickly and cheaply. And the installation of quick build projects becomes central to the community engagement itself. Every single one of our quick build projects we learn from, and we hear from the community in a way that it's very hard to hear from community when all they're looking at is a paper plan, and it's hard to imagine what that change might be. Similarly, we're great at running traffic demand models, but you never really know until you actually try something what the systemic impacts are going to be. So the result of that quick build process is that we're doing more effective engagement, making iterative adjustment to projects, getting the design right, and then later going in and taking the successful projects and putting them in concrete. We believe, and my staff is committed to, another doubling of our production of quick build facilities compared to last year. This bond funds the concretization of that work. And in addition to that, I think, as you know, we are working very hard with state and federal governments to legalize basic safety tools that have been so effective in other states and are ubiquitous in other countries all over the world. So that is our primary approach, is quick, rapid, experimental, engaged, quick build, followed by concrete, followed by changes to federal policy, as well as rapid expansion of every time we get additional legal authority, whether it is ubiquitous no right turn on red in the Tenderloin, or reducing the speed limit in what will soon be every neighborhood commercial district in San Francisco. In addition, of course, we're collecting data as we go along and course correcting.
It looks like our time is up. Is that right, Moises? Okay. the question was actually going to be for all the panelists, but just what is the timeline like, when does this roll out so that voters are aware for this and also for the other ballot measures?
So obviously it's on the June ballot. We are collaborating with the folks who were doing the fundraising for the campaign. And you all should be hearing about that in the coming months. If the bond measure passes, effectively what it does is allows for continuity of our efforts, along with a correction in the kinds of projects that we're building. So we're wrapping up Van Ness and Central Subway this year. We have learned a lot of hard lessons from those projects, and the expenditure plan for the bond incorporates all of those lessons and really focuses on the sort of stuff that we are very successful at, like the work that we're currently doing on Taraval Street or Geary, as well as our safety quick build work.
Well, thank you, Mr. Tumlin. And apologies, members, I should have asked for a motion, even for that extension. It's, we do want to keep the process with several more. Thank you so much for joining us today. And we'll move on to Measure B, which is on the June 7th ballot. And that is a charter amendment going in front of voters regarding the Building Inspection Commission. So we have Jennifer Fiber here today to speak for Prop B. Thank you, Jennifer. So you have 2 minutes, and then we'll have 10 minutes of questions from the members.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm Jennifer Fiber with the Proposition B. So San Francisco's Department of Building Inspection needs reform. We've all read about the stories of corruption and arrests by the FBI. And for many, the corruption has been an open secret that has been long-standing and never addressed. We believe that the unchecked corruption stems from the current structure of oversight, where the BIC, the Building Inspection Commission, has the regulated serve as the regulators. It is the only department where the director is hired by the commission with no say from the mayor or anyone else. Proposition B will change that. It will restore the power to the mayor and to hire and fire directors, which are chosen from a pool of suggestions by the commission, just like the planning department does it. Prop B also removes the strict designated industry seats that currently are there, and instead will allow members of the public to serve if they pass a public hearing confirmation. Specifically, the mayor would select 4 commissioners and the board would select 3. All of the nominees would have to be processed through a public hearing at the Rules Committee, where the public can speak about the appointees and the board members ultimately get to vote to confirm or reject. If we had this structure in the past, it's unlikely that ex-commissioners that the FBI are currently investigating would have survived because someone would have opposed them. Additionally, under Prop B, the superintendent position and assistant superintendent would be returned to civil service status. So we believe that this offers better protections for whistleblowers to have the backing of a union. In the public sphere, DBI is known for being slow and opaque and with a very archaic bureaucracy. Homeowners trying to renovate their homes are subject to costly and lengthy, is that the end? Process. So the goal of this is ultimately to restore integrity and public trust to a department that's suffering low morale. With better accountability with these reforms, the department can attract good people that can make the process more transparent and efficient. So we hope to have your support and any questions you have.
I will ask my process question, which is, when do you expect to enact this should the voters pass it? Because I understand the commissioners serve a certain length of time.
Yeah, so the commission that is currently seated would term out on July 1st, 2023, if this passes. And then there are staggered terms, so it's like a 1-year appointment and 2 years, so that there's always staggering. The current director has already been selected with this commission, so ostensibly the new commission could bring that up again, but yeah.
Thank you. And I have Vice Chair Galata.
Thank you. Thanks, Jennifer, for being with us. And very much support this. I think this is a much needed reform, the beginning of more reforms to come, hopefully. My question is just, can you remind us of the measure changes the appointment structure at all of the commission in terms of the split between the mayor and the board of supervisors? Does it, and just the roles of the commissioners as well? Can you just speak a little bit more about that?
Yeah, well, the numbers remain the same right now. The mayor gets to select 4 and the board president selects 3, but there's no process. So nobody else gets to review those choices. So that would change. Currently, there are 7 seats and they're designated in really strict terms. So one has to be an architect, one has to be a residential builder, one has to be an engineer. So instead, 2 of the 4 mayor seats could be one of those engineer, architect, or residential builders. And one of the president's nominees would have to be either a residential tenant or a nonprofit housing person. So the other 4 seats are unassigned and could be anyone.
Do we have other questions from members? Okay, I think we have extra time, but we can move on. Thank you so much, Ms. Fiber, for joining us to speak about Prop B on the June 7th ballot. So next, we have local measure C, and that is on recall timelines and vacancy appointments. This is also a charter amendment. San Francisco charter amendment that is under consideration. And we have a supervisor here. He is here since this is qualified for the ballot in his personal Saturday capacity. So Mr. Aaron Peskin, would you like to join us? You have 2 minutes to speak and then 10 minutes for questions from members. And we could extend that with a motion as well.
Thank you for the opportunity to address all 3 of these measures, recalls, ethics, and refuse rates. And I'd be remiss not to mention that we are in the midst of gathering support for ballot arguments that are due on Monday, this Monday, the 21st at noon, which is before your endorsements in the middle of next week. So I know we've reached out to many of you, but if any of you Democratic Party leaders are interested in signing on to an argument for any or all of these measures, we emailed you yesterday and would very much appreciate your response. And thanks to those who have already responded. And we can come find you with signature forms today or tomorrow. And thanks for putting all 3 of these measures together. And I want to also really thank and acknowledge the San Francisco Labor Council for having already endorsed all 3 of these measures. In the first, as you said, is a charter amendment now designated as Proposition C. That was really designed to reduce the costly special elections, as well as ensuring higher voter turnout in recalls. It was put on the ballot by a 7 vote of the board, with Supervisors Mandelman, Stephanie, Safai, and Melgar in the dissent. And the other 7 members voted to put it before the board voters. Prop C is really quite simple. Recall elections should not be held in the same year as a general election for that same seat. And let's just break it down. If an official has just been elected, i.e. the beginning of their term, it is my belief, and this charter amendment holds, that they deserve at least 1 year to do or attempt to do their job and fulfill their voter mandate before somebody or somebodies can file an attempt to recall that individual. It seems like a year, it makes sense. And that recalls aren't just used as a second bite at the apple for those who just lost an election. On the other hand, at the other end of a term, I don't think San Francisco taxpayers should be shelling out millions of dollars. The last one just cost $12 million to hold low turnout special elections when a general election for that seat is right around the corner, and hence the year prohibition in the last year prohibition when the seat is up. I do sincerely believe that San Francisco voters should be able to hold their elected officials accountable, and Prop C does not prohibit recalls. It's a good government measure that limits the ability of outside special interests to distort and undermine our democracy. Voters deserve to choose who represents them, and if a recall is successful, Prop C gives voters that choice by ensuring that all candidates have an equal opportunity in the next general election. As to appointments, the vacancy part of this, this is designed to discourage the chief executive from backing inappropriate recalls by disincenting the mayor, by changing the charter to have the mayor's appointee be a caretaker until the next regularly scheduled elections. And I think we should all agree when Governor Newsom was being recalled just a very short period of time ago, which cost California taxpayers over $200 million, 82% of Democrats and 2/3 of all Californians voted to support, were in favor of reasonable recall reform. It's only June coming up on this next ballot, and already our third election of the year. It's pretty exhausting. So I think this is a common sense reform, and I am happy to answer any questions.
Okay, we have a member Barry with a question.
Hi, Supervisor Peskin. Thank you. I'm always appreciative of all the work you do and the research you put into your work. My question for this is, our body is currently working on our bylaws when it comes to a process with recalls. And one of the things that we did want to highlight is the terminology on if a person has been proven of committing a crime and those type of drastic measures that maybe we can't wait for a general election. That person might need to go sit down somewhere. So do you have any little footnotes like that in this measure?
I do. The San Francisco Charter already has a provision, which provision I saw used when I was president of the Board of Supervisors to remove an elected official for official misconduct. That is precisely the charges that then Mayor Newsom filed against my then colleague, Supervisor Ed Jew, when he refused to resign after he was caught in an extortion scheme by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. It was used by Mayor Lee against Sheriff Mercarimi. So that provision already exists in law and has been used over the last 100 years.
So this measure wouldn't help that person stay until the next election?
This measure in no way changes the existing official misconduct provisions of the code, does not in any way take away the mayor's power to file official misconduct charges. And by the way, under the charter, when the mayor files official misconduct, that elected official or commissioner, by the way, is immediately removed from office.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question with regard to one provision toward the later end of that official's time in office. So if it prevents a recall election within 12 months of the next scheduled, can you say more about how that works in terms of the lead time it takes for people to gather signatures and have that qualify and have that all be approved by SF election? So what's the effective?
So the effect, it means in order to qualify it in the last year, that you would have to have turned your signatures in within 18 months of the end of that individual's term.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for clarifying. Do we have other questions for the supervisor? coming here in his personal capacity?
I do. My hand's up.
Thank you. Yes, Secretary Ibanez.
Thank you so much. Supervisor Peskin, one of the things that, and I don't know if I heard you mentioning this, but it is my opinion that when we have recall elections, we see the turnout, and we saw it very clearly here in San Francisco in terms of a very low turnout. And I believe that those who use recalls as a method to get elected officials out of office, it's also a method of suppressing voters or votes, in particularly in communities that have historically been oppressed in terms of not having, like communities of color who historically have had low turnout during elections. Can you tell me how your initiative is going to address this?
So Member Ibanez, thank you for the question. First of all, let me just be very clear, which is this is not designed to prevent the court of last resort, which is the admittedly rarely used tool of recall, which prior to the most recent recalls, the last recall I can remember in my lifetime was the Gray Panthers effort to recall then Mayor Dianne Feinstein, which is just a little while ago. And of course, we have the pending recall in June. But what this really does, I mean, relative to your question, is that certainly in the last year, it would make folks go to a general election with a higher turnout. But it does not stop what just happened. I mean, nor would it have stopped the recall of the district attorney, because that effort actually began after he had been in office a year. So this, I mean, is it perfect? No, but I mean, look, even with a low voter turnout, the numbers were staggering and overwhelming. Had it been a higher turnout, I suspect, albeit by a different margin, we would have likely had the same result. And I think and I say this as the former chair of the Democratic Party for 4 years, our collective responsibility is to drive voter turnout even in low turnout elections.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions from SFDCCC members? And thank you for your service, Supervisor.
Thank you to my next door neighbor who I see every day. Lee Malefit is in the office next door to me.
Oh, sorry, member Chen. That's my cursor. This is a little feature of Zoom. Going once, going twice. I think you're still staying on, although our next one is going to be Prop D. And the next four are going to be initiative ordinances. And that is victims and witness rights. I believe we have, let's see, supervisors in Stephanie in her personal capacity on a Saturday. So Catherine Stephanie is here to speak about her ballot measure. You have 2 minutes, and then we'll have 10 minutes for questions and answers from with the members.
Great. Thank you, Vice Chair Levitt, and good morning to everyone. Good morning, members. The San Francisco Victims' Rights Initiative, I believe, represents really a need that is very acute. Approximately 20,000 times per quarter, a person in San Francisco is a victim of crime, according to the police department crime victim data. As high as this number is, it's probably an undercount. The consensus among social scientists is that only 40% of crimes are actually reported. Only about 3,000 of the reported incidents result in arrests, and charges are filed in less than 1,000 cases. The victims are primarily women and people of color. In 2020, people of color were victims in 73% of aggregated assaults, 70% of battery cases, 83% of robberies, 63% of burglaries, 88% of homicides, and 67% of sexual assaults. In particular, the needs of domestic violence victims was particularly acute during the COVID-19 pandemic. Calls to San Francisco crisis hotlines increased by 40%. Calls to the Cooperative Restraining Order Clinic increased by 166%. And the turnaway rate for victims seeking emergency shelter was 79%. There was a 78% decrease in cases resolved through jury trial for domestic violence, stalking, and elder abuse during the COVID pandemic. Victim services right now in the city are balkanized. Services for victims are spread out across various city agencies and often require significant time and work navigating bureaucratic systems. They're located in the Department of Status of Women, the Department of Public Health, Human Rights Commission, the Office of Economic and Workforce Development. Of course, there's a separate victim services division in the DA's office, which this does not touch. This ballot initiative will create the Office of Victim and Witness Rights, and it will house the right to civil counsel for victims of domestic violence. So the Office of Victim and Witness Rights will kick off a process to create a victim first model for services, which we will find out through surveys what that really looks like. It will be outside of law enforcement, which I think is very important and a key component to this, and it will meet victims and witnesses where they are at. It will mandate that the services provide comprehensive services to victims and witnesses, including culturally competent and linguistically appropriate services, including, of course, translation services. We will consolidate and streamline the existing services that we have. Again, develop a city survey, an annual survey of victims and witnesses to get feedback on the quality, adequacy, and scope of services provided. These survey results should be used to inform the work of the office and generate new services as necessary. Now, the right to civil counsel for victims of domestic violence is extremely important and very necessary. So this will be another initial core responsibility of the office to manage this pilot program to provide victims of domestic violence with full scope civil legal counsel. Domestic violence, we know, remains a serious issue in San Francisco. The San Francisco Police Department responded to more than 3,000 DV related calls in 2020. Half of those cases were presented for prosecution. A third of those cases were charged. Victims of, again, primarily women and people of color. Individuals who report domestic violence will have an alternative and a new set of tools to end the cycle of violence. And this provision was based on the tenant's right to counsel that was passed by the voters in 2018. Individuals who report domestic violence or file a DV restraining order will be eligible for full scope legal representation to aid with other legal issues, including protective orders, gun violence restraining orders, which I've worked on in the city, custody, child support, Marcy's Law, alimony, social service benefits, healthcare, employment, and housing issues. All of these when not addressed and the victims don't have a way to deal with that legal representation that they so need, it keeps them trapped in that cycle of violence, harming themselves and their children as well. Can I wrap up? I think you'll care, but we estimate in the early years there will be about 500 to 800 clients, and that service will cost the city between 1 to 3 million, subject to funding by the mayor, of course, and the board of supervisors. And we have various people supporting. We've worked with many people: Open Door Legal, Bay Area Legal Aid, the Justice and Diversity Center of the SF Bar Association, Jewish Family and Children's Services, the Cooperative Restraining Order Clinic, API Legal Outreach, the Brady Campaign, Demand Action for Gun Sets in America, San Francisco Coalition Against Human Trafficking, the American Indian Cultural District, the Red Woman Rising Project, the Bigglesworth Foundation, and the National Coalition for Right to Counsel have all put time and effort and have been supportive of this effort. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Do we have questions? It looks like Member Berry has her hand.
Thank you, Chair Lovett. Supervisor Stephanie, thank you for your hard work you've always done when it comes to domestic violence. My question is this: as a survivor, I went to a restraining order clinic. It was in another county, but I have went through that process. So my question is, what would this office do any different that the clinic that we have now already does?
Well, it would provide more than just help with restraining orders, and it would certainly be able to direct victims to the Cooperative Restraining Order Clinic. They are working with us and they're very supportive. Often more is needed than just a restraining order. People need help with custody and separation and divorce and housing assistance, navigating all the rules and the bureaucratic red tape around getting that is where victims really need help. So it will, I love that question because it will definitely give people a place to go for not only restraining order help, but more services as well.
We also have Secretary Ibanez.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Supervisor Stephanie. Thank you for joining us here today. I do have a question, and I am wondering, and I was trying to figure where the funding for this program would come. I know that right now there's a program very similar through the DA's office, and it's also underfunded. And I was trying to figure out where will the funding come from, and how is this going to be funded? Because we know that we can put things on the ballot, and if it's going to be successful, it has to have the resources behind it. So that would be my question.
Absolutely, and it's a great question. After this passes, the mayor would appoint the director. The director would then come up with a comprehensive plan and present that to the Board of Supervisors. The Board of Supervisors would then, of course, be involved in deciding whether or not that plan is actually going to work. They're going to have input. And of course, the Board of Supervisors will be the one who decides whether or not to fund and at what level. The reason why I went to the voters for this, because we are developing a right to civil counsel for domestic violence victims. And it is my hope that if the voters say, yes, this is something that we want, the Board of Supervisors will then fund that. That's what happened with the right to civil counsel for tenants facing eviction, which I voted for and believe in greatly. That is a need that even costs more than what we're doing here. So it is my hope that if the voters speak and say this is something we believe people have a right to in our city to help them get out of the cycle of violence and help children and women that have suffered so greatly, that the board will then fund it.
And then can I just ask a follow-up? How would this be in conflict with the program that the DA has?
I don't see any conflict at all. I see this as both offices working together. The DA's office, of course, has an incredibly important role in preparing victims for trial and being there as victim advocates in their victim advocate division. I actually have someone working for me who was a former victim advocate in the DA's office. So I do understand how these offices will work together. The DA's office can't do it all. And sometimes there's cases that aren't even proceeding through a court case. They're too afraid to even call the police. So this office will be a place where people can go that's not law enforcement related, because the DA's office is still the chief law enforcement office. There are many victims of domestic violence that don't get involved in the criminal justice system in a way that affords them the help at the DA's office. So I think it will be complementary, and it is my hope that the offices will work together. But the DA's office, they're under a constitutional mandate to represent the state in criminal cases, and the amount of victims and the amount of cases that are out there, the DA's office simply can't handle all of it. And this will cover all crimes, not just domestic violence.
And then just follow up. I mean, I guess for me, it's more like, again, I want to be able, and I hope that this program that you have does actually create that, because for me, it's an important thing to ensure that our victims are protected, specifically people of color, poor people. But I do hope that the program does not compete in services and resources by the current program that is directed by the district attorney, and that program also gets funded because it also provides important services.
And
thank you so much.
Sorry, and I think that's an excellent point, and because where I want to assure you is that the director will have to take all of that into consideration when he or she presents a plan to the Board of Supervisors. And of course, the board will weigh in that time. And it is my hope that if the board sees any conflict there or sees any problem, that those issues will be raised then.
Can I ask another question? Sorry, and I apologize, I'm trying to really understand this, because you have a director, and I'm hoping, and I'm wondering, why is it that the director is not being appointed by the district attorney? I get, and I understand the role of our mayor, but I also understand the role of the district attorney. And I'm wondering, why would that director not work closely and be appointed by the district attorney? I'm just trying to understand the rationale behind it.
Yeah, no, it's a very good question. And you know, one of the key components of this, and I really want it to remain outside of law enforcement for so many different reasons. And the DA is the chief law enforcement officer. And I want this, you know, I'm a former department head under the mayor and the executive branch. And I believe that this needs to be separate and apart from the DA's office. And like I said, it's my intention, and that these are offices that would work together. They have different duties. The DA's office represents victims when they are going through the criminal justice system. They are victim advocates for those witnesses that they need to prep, but they cannot do it all. And this is separate and apart from everything that the DA does. So again, I think it's important that we have a place where victims can go that does not deal with law enforcement, and again, works collaboratively with the DA's office and all other of our law enforcement agencies.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Vice Chair Galata.
Thank you, Chair Levitt. Thank you, Supervisor Stephanie, for being here. I just had a few questions just in terms of the structure of this. So it sounds like this would create a new office or a position, at least a director position initially. Would that be placed under the city administrator's purview? And kind of what oversight or accountability could we expect for this office? And does this centralize, is the idea behind this to centralize or bring together other offices that are currently working on victim services? I mean, I know that it doesn't impact the DA's office in terms of their victim services unit, but can you just talk a little bit more about what the kind of vision is? Is this a kind of a central place, and does it consolidate or streamline existing services? And it sounds like this would be broader than also just serving victims of crime, but perhaps almost like functioning like a public advocate of sorts. This sounds very similar to that idea, which is something that I know many of us supported when that was put forward to the voters. So just can you share a little bit more about the structure and just how this office is going to function?
Yes, thank you so much for that question, because I'm all about streamlining and government efficiency, not creating more bureaucracy. So yes, we would have a new director who would serve separate and apart from the city administrator's office. You know, we looked at maybe doing it in the city attorney's office, and decided really what's best was to have it its sole department. And when I say department, I mean mini baby department. And we would have a director that the mayor would appoint. Again, it would be under the executive branch. And then my idea, after talking to Cheryl Davis, after talking to Kate Sophis, after talking to Kimberly Ellis, talking to all the other department heads who have little bits of victim services here and there, what we would do and what the newly appointed director would do, would talk to everybody about how do we consolidate the services that are already out there, and so that we create a one-stop shop where victims of crime can go. Because right now there is so much red tape, there is so much confusion. People don't know. I mean, they know when they're victims of crime, but they don't know where to go after. And I don't think we make it easy as a city for them to navigate the minimal services that we do have. And the director will also then create that survey that will inform us what more should we be offering to victims based on the survey we're doing of those that are coming to the office for help. So it will definitely, the director will present a plan to the Board of Supervisors for after talking to all the other department heads and the DA's office about how we consolidate and streamline the services we already have and put it in a comprehensive office. And this is what the department heads have been saying. They would like something like that. When I spoke to the mayor, she would like something like that. So that's my intention, and that's the intention of the initiative.
Can I just ask one quick follow-up question, which is just, are we at time?
Can we make a motion to extend by 5 minutes?
So moved.
Thank you. Great, a lot of seconds. Is 5 minutes sufficient? Are there other questions?
Just have one
Did you
quick
have a
follow-up
follow-up?
question. Sorry, remember, yes, and just thank you. would this office then be contracting out? I mean, in terms of if this potential caseload, so are we contracting out with legal counsel, or are we working internally with existing city resources or city attorneys? Is there an expectation around that in terms of being able to provide a level of service? And are there concerns around contracting out? I mean, I have concerns around that.
Yeah, no, so we would contract out with nonprofit organizations like the Open Door Legal, Bay Area Legal Aid, agencies that provide these services at a low cost rate. This is not something our city attorneys or deputy city attorneys would be providing. And that, that's a natural way that we conduct business in the city and county of San Francisco. Obviously, there would be that would all be subject to RFPs, an open competitive solicitation process that would be transparent. As you know, I just passed legislation making sure that we have, transparency around all the grants that are given out to different agencies. We had $5.4 billion over 3 years to 5,746 agencies without any competitive solicitation. And I created Administrative Code Section 25 to make sure that we have transparency around all those grants. So this is something that's the natural way of doing business in an open and competitive solicitation through RFPs. But we know there are incredible legal aid organizations out there that do this type of work. And that's why we had them involved in asking them how would this look and what could they do. And we learned from them about what do they do to help domestic violence victims. We've spoken to victims of domestic violence that have received services and how that helped them turn things around. So yes, we would definitely do a process for contracting out, which of course is cheaper than using our deputy city attorneys for such representation.
If we have enough time, I just have a question, and some of it involves collaboration, but also record keeping. So thinking to a district attorney case, I think it was from 2019, where it recently came to light that the DA's office had reached out multiple times to the victim in question. That record keeping is really important. So let's say there are cases where it involves this new department, and so the social services provided might potentially uncover issues around, the criminal case, but it could also be just, any other number of issues in trying to serve the people involved. And can you say how to ensure that there is collaboration, but also that important record keeping where necessary for both departments?
Yeah, well, definitely. I mean, the department and the director would be responsible for keeping track of who we're helping and who's coming into the office. Of course, any issues that come up between the client or the victim and their attorney would be subject to attorney-client privilege. I mean, there's some things that will not be known in terms of what issues might come up between that attorney that's working with the victim or not. But of course, the director will keep track of the victim that came in and then received the help and was, referred to whatever legal aid or whoever was able to help at that point in time. And of course, it would be on the city to pay for that.
Thank
Did
you.
that answer your question?
I think so, yeah. Thank you. Do we have other questions? Great. Thank you so much, Supervisor, for your personal capacity.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you. Okay, so we are back to another supervisor in his personal capacity. So Mr. Peskin, we are looking at Measure D on the local measure going to the June 7th ballot. And this is on behested payments. Take it away. You have 2 minutes. And then we'll have 10 minutes at least for question and answer with members. Thank you.
Thank you again. So yeah, it's been a tough 2 years rooting out corruption in San Francisco government that we are all painfully aware of and embarrassed by. And in the wake of the revelations in the Mohammed Nuru matter a couple of years ago, wherein Director of Public Works, Nuru, was directing third parties to, in essence, launder money through the parks, the San Francisco Parks Alliance. The city controller, Ben Rosenfield, produced a report, a public integrity review of what really is the pay-to-play politics that has been present in San Francisco, and found in that report that these so-called behested payments present, not surprisingly, a high risk of corruption. And behested payments occur when city officials, just what I just said, raise money from interested parties who have contracts or permits or entitlements that they got from the city or have with the city, or other administrative or financial matters that are pending before the department. It's the classic definition of quid pro quo corruption. And sadly, we've seen that behested payments can be used to enrich public officials indirectly through the use of outside slush funds like the Parks Alliance had in the case of Nuru and Public Works. And frankly, this kind of behavior has become the preferred loophole for special interests who want to seek influence and get around laws that prevent outright good old bribery. And I think San Franciscans deserve to know that their public officials are making decisions based on what's right and what their best judgment is and what their ideology in politics is, and not on behalf of corporations and special interests that are giving donations to their favorite causes, whether it's in a slush fund or not. And look, when former director Nuru asked Recology to donate to the Parks Alliance slush fund, he was in the process of approving increases to their residential refuse rates, and that was a behested payment. When former DBI officials who are now under federal indictment were raising money from permit expediters whose permits they were rubber stamping, which is why you had to hear about our Proposition B, those too were behested payments. So let's put an end to behested payments from interested parties and an end to pay-to-play politics. And the reason I underscore interested parties is that I acknowledge, and I think we all acknowledge, that there's an important role that charitable giving and nonprofits play in the life of San Francisco and its government and our web of nonprofits. But it really does a disservice not only to the nonprofits and the city, but also to the city when we taint that good work with, a veneer of corruption. A little quick political background. The Board of Supervisors actually passed a piece of legislation sponsored by Supervisor Haney and myself back in December. It was a unanimous vote. We then made a few tweaks to that and put it on the ballot with what you see in front of you. That was put on the ballot by myself, President Walton, Supervisors Chan, Marr, and Preston. And this thing does two things that the legislation that we passed in December doesn't do. First, it applies these behested restrictions to the Board of Supervisors itself. And let me be frank, and this was the case with the landmark California Political Reform Act decades ago, elected officials, candidly, are very reticent to regulate themselves. And second, and of equal importance, this measure increases the threshold to amend any aspect of this law from a simple majority of the board to a 2/3 majority of the board, if and only if it has been recommended by a majority of the Ethics Commission. So it makes it tamper-proof or very difficult to tamper with. And with all due respect to my three colleagues who signed an argument opposing this Proposition E, their argument, frankly, respectfully, fails to establish why we should be raising money from interested parties that we are granting contracts to. I think it is time to stamp that out. Prop E is for ethics. I hope you'll endorse it. It too is endorsed by the San Francisco Labor Council, as well as the very well-respected San Francisco Friends of Ethics that consists of a number of past ethics commissioners and officers. Thank you for the opportunity to present.
Looks like we have Member Berry with a question.
Thank you, Vice Chair Lovett. Supervisor Peskin, thank you again for the information you shared with us in concern on this ballot measure. My question is, who, if you already mentioned it, I apologize, but who are the three that oppose this?
That would be my friends, supervisors, Stephanie, Mandelman, and Melgar.
Thank you. That is all.
I will raise my hand and ask a question. Just to play devil's advocate, are there some unintended consequences? Sort of in my other capacity, I was having a conversation with an OED manager around, potentially assisting ethnic businesses and just building capacity because they don't have access to, digital technologies in a certain form, right? I won't name the companies, but they were looking at a partnership. Our office had thought about approaching it in a different way, more from the community, but they had been looking at a partnership involving some sort of, kind of corporate beneficence, right? Sponsorship of these programs to support the ethnic businesses in getting into the digital space, especially in light of how the pandemic has hit us all. So that said, how are these kind of partnerships affected? Because, I heard some, frustration, and I'm sure you've encountered that before around how to navigate these spaces when it's understandable. We are trying to deal with, years, probably decades of corruption, but there are these other transactional items that might deserve some attention.
Yeah, it's a very good and admittedly thorny question, but let me delve down into some of the details of the legislation. It does not prevent city officials or members of the Board of Supervisors from engaging in fundraising. It prevents them from engaging in fundraising from parties that they are doing business with. And it actually has some very bright line defined timelines around that. So if, for instance, the Board of Supervisors voted to give AT&T a contract, I could not go to AT&T and ask them to give a donation to a deserving nonprofit for 1 year after we granted AT&T that contract. But it would not prevent me from going to, I'm making it up, Verizon that we did not grant a contract to and saying, Verizon, out of the goodness of your heart, would you like to make a donation to this deserving nonprofit? So what it really does is it stops the behavior of going to interested parties that are seeking influence from you. And by the way, I cannot ask them for money during the pendency of a negotiation. So if right now the Board of Supervisors is negotiating with AT&T, I can't say, oh, and by the way, while we're having this negotiation, wherein we're discussing, how much you're going to charge me for this, would you please give a donation to my favorite nonprofit? But that does not prevent and that precludes me. But there are many instances where, say, the head of Rec and Park enters into a contract that doesn't go to the Board of Supervisors. That does not make me an interested party. And this is all very clearly defined in the legislation. And by the way, the Ethics Commission has recently promulgated regulations that have been disseminated to every department head and every member of the Board of Supervisors and every elected officials that hopefully we have all read so that we don't screw it up. But I think that is a price worth paying to have clean government.
I see a hand from Vice Chair Galata. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Supervisor Peskin. Thank you for your leadership on this. I just had a question about kind of oversight in terms of how we know what activity is happening. And my understanding is the Form 700 is like a primary vehicle where we know who's giving money to who. So is that, and is the Ethics Commission involved in terms of just how this is enforced? So who kind of is the enforcer? How do we make sure that with these guardrails in place that people are conforming with the law?
So good, very good questions. So relative to Form 700 statements of economic interest, those show what the economic interests are of the elected official or the department head, the filer. They do not show behested activity. However, under state law, whenever an elected official behests a payment of $5,000 or more pursuant to the California Fair Political Practices Act, the official is required to file a state form. Locally, the enforcement body for that, in addition to the State Fair Political Practices Commission, is the San Francisco Ethics Commission, and the enforcement arm for this would be the San Francisco Ethics Commission.
Thank you. And do we have any other questions? We'll ask you to keep your camera on, Supervisor, as we look at Measure F, which is the Refuse Collection and Disposal Initiative Ordinance going on the June 7th ballot. And you have 2 minutes to present, then we have 10 minutes or possibly more for questions.
So former supervisor and DCCC member Avalos knows this matter very, very well. 90 years ago, exactly 90 years ago, don't ask me exactly what was going on then, but the year was 1932. The voters of San Francisco passed an ordinance that we call the 1932 ordinance that granted an exclusive monopoly to what we now call recology. It had 97 routes for residential refuse collection in San Francisco. All of those 97 routes were ultimately owned by Sunset Scavengers and Golden Gate Disposal, which today are owned by Recology. And that system is outdated, outmoded, and arguably broken. It relates a little bit to what we were just talking about in Prop E and what you were talking about a little bit earlier in Proposition B, which is that we came to realize and understand that one person could, who served as the official who presided over the rate of that recology was granted. So the way the 1932 system worked, Recology or Sunset Golden Gate would come to the city from time to time and propose new rates. The original rates were set out in the 1932 ordinance, and the one city official who was charged with reviewing their rate application and issuing the rate order was and has been for the last 90 years the Director of Public Works. The decision of the director was appealable in whole or in part to a rate board consisting of the controller, the general manager of the Public Utilities Commission, and the city administrator. In 2017, that entire system did not work. Recology came in and asked for a 16% outrageous rate increase. They ended up being granted by then Director Mohammed Nuru a 14.6% increase. We realized through the good work of the city attorney in the wake of the 2020 scandal revelations that Recology had double charge. The real justifiable rate increase the city attorney determined through very good work at the controller's office should have been half of the rate that was granted, approximately 7% as compared to approximately 14%. The city sued Recology. Every residential ratepayer in San Francisco was issued a rebate to the total tune of $94.5 million. By the way, there have since been additional revelations that the city attorney did not realize the full extent of the overcharging, and that rate should have actually been lower yet again. And it looks like there is more money on the table, and stay tuned sometime in the next few months. And this is public information. The controller wrote a letter in November that is a public letter, and it was covered by some media that there are additional overcharges that have been discovered. This measure simply does a few things. It makes the city controller the rate administrator. It changes the rate board to include a ratepayer advocate. It was the subject of a year of both meetings amongst city officials as well as meetings from a wide group of stakeholders, ranging from the San Francisco Tenants Union to the San Francisco Apartment Association, the building owners and managers, the Teamsters that drive the trucks and do the sorting, the Department of the Environment, as Mr. Galata is probably aware, the Public Utilities Commission, and the very good work of a team of experts at the Controller's Office resulted in this change that was supported by the mayor, all 11 members of the board, and the United House of the San Francisco Labor Council, and we would be delighted to get your endorsement.
Thank you, Supervisor Mr. Peskin. Moises, just in terms of timekeeping, I don't think we've generally had a lot of spillover around the Q&A piece. Can we make a motion that whatever excess time for the speaking just kind of fold into the 12 total minutes?
So moved.
Okay, thank you. All right, all in favor? Yes, by acclamation. Okay, we have a small group here today on Saturday. So let's just continue the timekeeping. And do we have questions here? I don't see any in the stack. Garbage, our favorite subject.
I personally, oh, sorry, I raised my hand. Go ahead, Peter.
Okay, so yeah, Vice Chair Galata.
Thank you. And thank you, Supervisor Peskin, as well, for your leadership on this. As someone who's very familiar with the refuse rate setting process, it's been ripe for reform for quite some time. And I think this is a really strong proposal, and I'm happy to be supporting it. One question I had about the composition of the the new board, the city administrator clearly will have a seat on the board. You know, in the past, Public Works was really self-dealing in terms of their representation on the board, because they also have a material interest. They benefit from the rates. They receive money. I'm given the city administrator, the Public Works still falls under the city administrator's direction. Is there any concern about the city administrator also having a material interest in those rates? So I'm just curious about if that's enough of a bright line of a differentiation, or Public Works potentially still being kind of involved in the shadows around the rate setting process.
Really good question, Member Galata. A couple of thoughts on that. One is we actually did think about that, and we actually did talk about that. And one of the things that colored our thinking in that conversation was the notion, the reality that the voters last year passed Proposition B, which creates for the first time in 150 years, a commission over the Department of Public Works. And we felt that that was reasonable governmental separation between the city administrator and the director of Public Works. So that was one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is that the 1932 ordinance, the director of Public Works was the judge and the jury as it related to rates. That has actually been completely taken out of Public Works and given to the controller, who will now serve as the rate administrator. So it will be the controller who reviews the rate application, and the controller does not make the decision. The controller then makes a recommendation to the rate board. The rate board, in the old days, if there was no appeal to them, and by the way, sometimes these appeals were not over the actual rate that was being charged, they were over other aspects. Aspects having to do with the Department of the Environment that has been working their butts off for years to make sure that waste is, diverted from the waste stream, composting programs, what have you. So those could be the subject of appeal. The way it will work now is the rate board will actually look at the rate administrator's decision and make that ultimate ruling. There are two city agencies, Environment and Public Works, that benefit from the rate with what's called impound accounts. And we actually built that into the legislation, where they actually, this always happened behind closed doors. That will no longer happen behind closed doors. In this legislation, they are actually, the Public Works Commission and the Commission on the Environment are required to do it all in public. So it's not like the old days where you guys in Public Works would say, hey, this is how much we need in the impound account. All of that has to be done publicly. So I think the concerns which we thought about relative to the city administrator sitting on there have been structurally addressed.
Thank you. Do we have other questions from members here today? Great. Well, thank you so much for your time, Supervisor. Appreciate your taking the time on a
Thanks for the
Saturday.
opportunity. Thanks for spending your Saturday.
All right.
Bye, everybody.
Take care. We now have one more item, and I think we will finish before 1 p.m. today. So our last item is going to be an initiative ordinance, and that is going to be on the public health emergency leave. I invite Edward Wright to come here and speak about that for 2 minutes. We will also then take 10 minutes and extendable by motion if people want to speak and ask questions more around this particular measure. Take it away, Mr. Wright.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair Lovett. Thank you, DCCC members. Good afternoon. I'm here to speak on behalf of Proposition G, as Vice Chair Lovett mentioned, public health emergency leave. The reason that we have brought this measure forward is because COVID-19 has revealed massive gaps in protections for essential workers, and because climate change is driving worse and worse fire seasons every year, and with it, worsening air quality. Public health emergency leave addresses those threats by providing 2 additional weeks of paid leave to hundreds of thousands of San Francisco workers during emergencies. Public health emergency leave would become available automatically during any public health emergency to use if you're sick, if you need to quarantine, if you need to take care of a family member, or if you can't work because of the emergency. It's available upfront. It does not need to be accrued, and it covers all employees of private companies with 100 or more employees anywhere in the world, and all city employees. All small businesses are entirely exempt. On unhealthy air quality days, outdoor workers with asthma or other conditions that make them sensitive to poor air quality would have public health emergency available to protect them. And we know that protecting workers protects public health. The pandemic has shown that our health, our wellness is interconnected, that we're only as healthy as our neighbors. And we feel that no person should have to choose between being able to pay your rent or going to work with a contagious and potentially deadly disease. No parent should have to choose between a paycheck or sending a sick child to school. By extending public health emergency leave for the current and future emergencies, we're acting on the lessons that we've learned from this pandemic, and we will be more prepared for the next one. I think this is a common sense policy that empowers workers to protect themselves and all of us. With the support of San Francisco Democrats and the Democratic Party, we led the way in passing paid sick leave in 2006, and we're here to ask that we once again lead and pass public health emergency leave in 2022. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Do we have any questions from our members? Yes, Member Berry.
Hi, thank you, Chair. I love it. Mr. Wright, is there any opposition to this?
There is, as of now, no official opposition. No.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Let me raise my hand. So I have a question with regard to the state laws that are essentially trying to do that same thing, add on 2 extra weeks of sick leave. How does that intersect with this particular measure if passed?
Yeah, thank you. So just for background info, the state legislature has expanded extended paid leave through the end of September. This law, if passed, would not go into effect until the beginning of October. It also has an offset provision so that if there are future extensions of additional paid leave for future emergencies or the ongoing COVID emergency, that as long as that leave is available for the same purposes and used for the same purposes as this, that those hours would count towards the requirements in public health emergency leave.
I actually have a follow-up question if there aren't other questions. How does the word get out to the small businesses? Well, I'm sorry, I understand that all small businesses would be exempt, but let's say you have 100 employees in a local business, and how is the outreach done in education around this so that then employees know what their rights are?
Yeah, so implementation of this law would be led by the Office of Labor Standards Enforcement, which is also the agency in charge of implementing and enforcing our other labor laws, like paid sick leave.
Great. Do we have other questions around public health emergency leave? Okay, going once, going twice. Thank you, Mr. Wright, and thank you to all the presenters who have joined us today. And again, we had proponents on this call. As I mentioned earlier in the call, for those who joined later, we would have invited the folks who listed themselves as opponents. But I think given the deadlines for municipal elections and then our timing around the 72-hour notice, the opponents materialized at some point, but we do try to extend this. And of course, if opponents and proponents have reached out to us ahead of this process. So today, again, is the interview process for these local ballot measures going to the June 7th election. On Wednesday, March 23rd, we are going to have a regular monthly meeting of the SFDCCC. And so far, this is agenda item number 8. You can keep track of it on our website, sfdemocrats.org, and look for the 72-hour agenda in advance of our Wednesday meeting. And I'll echo a member's comment saying that I miss seeing some of you in person. Some of you I do get to. And there's something nice about having these Zoom meetings. Let's hope that we can make them more accessible as well. So also if there's a need for translation, for interpretation at our meetings, please reach out and make that request. I want to thank Treasurer Morales. I don't think she's on that call, but she did some interpretation on the fly. And we do want to make that available in other languages, of course, Mandarin, Cantonese, and all the languages that are spoken in the city. So is there any other business? There's just kind of a disclaimer around new business, and then we are adjourning after that. Any announcements, or shall we just wrap up and see you all on Wednesday? Have a great Saturday. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Lee.
you.
Good job, Lee.
Thank you.
Happy
Yep.
Saturday.
Thanks.
Happy
Yes.
Saturday. Like the cherry blossoms or whatever you have there. Remember all those? Are we off? Yeah. Where are you driving to, Gloria?
A board meeting.